I guess I'll start with the present. I think it's better to maybe travel to the past from the present. It's an unusual one, but when you look at the international situation, unfortunately, we are speaking during the week of the World Economic Forum, whose preoccupation is this question of the changing global order. And everybody says the era of rule-based global order is over. My interest is your reading of the international situation on the one hand, but the implication for global labor movement or the place of organized labor in whatever comes after the rule-based order falls apart.
Well, I'm so worried that about what is happening today that I initiated a discussion amongst the SAFTU national office bearers, who later convened a special national executive committee of the Federation. Accidentally took place on Friday, the 16th of January. And we were reading and extremely concerned about the events of the 3rd of November, when everybody was still up and dancing in the beach. Donald Trump did the unthinkable, but not the unprecedented. When he sent his secret police to go and abduct a head of state of another sovereign country in the form of Venezuela. And it was not Trump waking up in a spare of a moment. It's a Trump that have said, I want to take over Gaza and to turn it into a big casino and to generate money for the other oligarchs from the United States of America. And the price of doing that, we know, is to flatten the whole area and to force everybody into exile. And basically to create conditions where you will be able to send gators, tractors, flatten the place and restart it as a business entity. Same man that would have said to Panama, I'm going to take over the Strip. And who would have said to the head of state of Canada, you are just like another provincial premier here, and we're taking over Canada. And would have been waving a finger to Mexico, Venezuela, Colombia, and South Africa. Because I think a lot of people in South Africa think that this thing is far from us. From what is happening now, it's not far at all. The propaganda that South Africa is conducting a genocide against Afrikaner or whites is a calculated precursor to a possible same thing that is happening to Venezuela. So we've convened that, very convinced that what we need is a broadest possible front of patriots here in South Africa. These patriots will be purely all those who believe in the sovereignty, who believes in the United Nations Charter, who believes in the international rules, that there ought to be a way, and the most preferred way of solving conflicts is the multilateralism. And all of those who believe in that ought to belong to this broad front of organizations that will say, we are prepared to first defend South Africa, defend Venezuela, defend Palestine, defend Mexico, defend Colombia, and possibly defend Brazil, defend the DRC, Sudan, and Somalia, and defend many, many other countries who insist that the world will drift back towards barbarism that Rosa Luxemburg speaks about if we allow the oligarchs in America to do what they're currently doing. So we're having this discussion at that moment. And you know, there's, as I always say, when a moment like this, there are two possibilities that can happen. The rational in the politics of the ideology, left-leaning individuals can easily be drowned by the ultra-right conservatives into doing nothing. In South Africa, for example, the ultra-right, including white elements who are conservative supporters of apartheid colonialism, are saying now, we love South Africa. We are concerned about this crisis of water, electricity, this and that. Don't be concerned about Palestine and leave those things to other people. Let's focus on our own issues. That's a very clever, calculated strategy to defocus us to the biggest danger that the world is facing now. And a world that is, if China and India and were not the powerful institutions that they are, we will be drifting towards what Trump tried on Iran, which he tried, and he saw that these guys are very powerful. He knows that he suspects that they may have nuclear, but others openly do not hide the fact that they have nuclear, which is what makes him to step back from time to time and use these other proxies to conduct a war that is a war of the most rapid, aggressive, imperialist and oligarch control of the world resources today. So this moment can give us a lull, and some people can be convinced by the right wing in South Africa and elsewhere in the world that we, with our big internal problems, must focus on our big internal problems and forget about Donald Trump and what he's doing and what he now represents in the world. But also, there's a possibility that the citizens of the United States, led by the working class with the unions now more than any other time, very actively organizing in the streets against Donald Trump and agenda, because they've now unfortunately moved from hoping that this America First will mean reindustrialization, the tariffs protection will mean more jobs for Americans. No, the opposite is happening. First, it slaughtered 2 million jobs in the public sector, just like that. And there is now a crisis in the economy. They are deindustrializing and not industrializing. And they are facing all manner of other problems, inflation, and that's why they are going for the chairperson of a Federal Reserve. Where have you ever heard that, Except now, this is the extent of the crisis. So that's what is happening. That's what is happening. So that moment of workers mobilizing in America, I hope can extend to South Africa, the African continent, and to Europe and to Asia, and that the working class and citizens who believe in the world order that saw the conclusion of the Second World War as an order of multilateralism, where problems and tensions are solved in a particular way through the United Nations, will be the one that is defended by everybody, and that eventually we will defeat the oligarchs. And in my view, there are oligarchs not only in the USA. There's an oligarch in Russia. In my view, they are the same thing. That's why they are now cutting deals. You can flatten Ukraine. We will flatten the rest of the world for the same purpose. We want access to the resources of the world.
But there are, in this multilateral institution, on the one hand, having traveled in your political journey, I would know that incidentally, institutions that are worrying to organized labor, on the one hand, don't seem to be in Trump's radar. He doesn't speak of IMF. He doesn't say, at least I'm not aware. He will say something about all other international organizations that he's not interested in and resign America from them. But not IMF, not the World Bank. That's the one thing I'd like your view on. What does it mean? Because these are equally institutions of that nature that have been operating at the level of a global system. But on the other hand is the International Labour Organization. I just want to know the reading from yourself and the rest of SAFTU. What do you make, firstly, of the silence on, it's not just World Bank and IMF, but Security Council as well. But on the other hand, and also, I mean, his world tariffs war disorganized the WTO, so that we can forget. But in your determination, when you look at this entire, what will become the fate of the international labor? Will it still exist in this world that is falling apart? Or we are just going to be left with financial and security institutions that are at the center of reasserting American power in the world?
Well, he doesn't like any multilateral institution that is going to impose rules that inhibit his oligarchic big business first agenda. Because this American first agenda is actually oligarch first agenda, not people's first, not ordinary American people. And that's why we've got to find a common cause with these ordinary people of America who are marching in the streets now. How disappointed I am that we only now scrambling to form a broad patriotic front. There was a first demonstration on Friday in the U.S. Embassy. There's another one. NUMSA is organizing on the 24th of January. There's another international one on the 6th of February. And so we're only responding now, later than the American citizens. Perhaps you can say it's because they are sitting right on the fire. He doesn't like the rules, Trump. He sees the rules as undermining his purpose, which is to build a frontier of filthy rich people who can access the wealth everywhere in the world. He doesn't like the International Labour Organization because it imposes international norms and standards to respect the most basic rights and protections of workers. He doesn't like that. You know that I didn't know this until we attended the G20 Labour Forum, that in June there was for the first time no labor representation from America. He just would not give them resources, would not give them any permission, nothing. And I was saying to other comrades, the mistake that we keep on making is to massage a madness, in that I would have thought that the response of the trade union movement in the ILO would have been to refuse to participate. Not because America is special. The Swaziland have done that before, other dictatorships have done that before. But the symbolism of an America refusing representation by its own workers in the International Labour Organization, to me, should have never been allowed. We should have stopped it and said nothing. He doesn't like the World Trade Organization because it imposes trade rules. He wants to use trade as a weapon and to beat people into line. He wants to use AGOA as a weapon. He wants to use even bilateral engagements between the nations. And he wants to weaponize everything to advance the agenda of oligarchs in America. He doesn't like even all environmental protection. He doesn't want child protection. Perhaps he's being accused of all manner of things. He doesn't like anything that preserve an orderly society that is grappling with the crisis of our times everywhere. You corrected your analysis. I didn't notice this, that you have never said a thing about the rating agencies, the IMF and the World Bank. And my theory will be that perhaps those institutions are driving the Washington consensus agenda. And he likes some of those rules to beat everybody into the Washington consensus. And but I don't think that he will even like the norms and standards. I'm looking forward to hearing what's going to happen in the World Economic Forum now.
Yes.
He's saying he's going there. So there's a statement that I was looking at only this morning, issued by the NATO, Europe, Finland, Denmark, Norway, Germany, Finland, even the great, the United Kingdom, have signed into the statement. Wishy-washy, no, you can't do this thing, we are your friends. How could you be doing this to Greece, Denmark, but he's coming. So they're going to have to grow some spine and openly confront him and to say what he does even is a threat to even the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum, I've never favored it. You know what I used to call it? I used to call it is a stage where the capitalist class calls all of the states all over the world to come and strip environmental protections, labor protections, child labor protections, and so forth, until they stand there naked for capital to choose where they are going to be choosing which part of their bodies and to parade as their trophies. But he's going to be there. It's a stage. You remember, he likes publicity. He can't leave that stage out. Yes. And he's so excited that he's going to be, can you believe he's going to be hosting the FIFA family?
Yes.
This guy even gives him a peace award ahead of the ceremony to welcome the nations. And this guy says, I'm going to block fans from 4 nations are not going to come here as part of my crazy international policy. But maybe the IMF World Bank are spared from that rhetoric because he likes the rules that they're imposing to the rest of the world, the Washington consensus.
Maybe that's an opportune moment to come back here at home. This assault South Africa is facing under political conditions of the government of national unity. It has been in charge of South Africa for over a year now, since 2024. And I want to ask, for this to happen, this assault on South Africa's human rights, foreign policy orientation and solidarity with Palestine, Western Sahara, an insistence on negotiations, peace, and all of that. nuclear proliferation, all those important things that made the world not descend into world war. How do you read GNU? Are we as a country in a best place with the government of national unity to face this assault and its possible escalation? I don't know to what directions you are, or possibly will be able to tell us, where do you see it? If Trump's next destination were to be South Africa, what form of attack would he impose on us? But when you look at the GNU and the values that international relations, foreign policy inherited from centuries of the liberation struggle, are we in the best place to face this international assault?
Not at all. Not at all. Look at, this is the worst moment for South Africa in the context of it being perhaps the next nation to be directly confronted by Donald Trump. I told you already that the right-wing tails are up, and they are pointing to your structural crisis, the world record beating unemployment, poverty, inequality, corruption, collapse of public sector, collapse of infrastructure, army in the West state. There's a multiple layers of a crisis.
Yes.
It is that thanks to that crisis that we now have a government of national unity, because our people have turned back their backs against a liberation movement they loved, that disappointed them, that betrayed them, to the point that they will now rather stay at home and don't care about the consequences, because it seemed to them everything is the same. We are, I don't want to use a rude language, but we are in a mess because of our leaders, so they don't care. They don't care. There's a crisis of representation already, and in the country, across the board, not just political, across the board. People are on their own, and we're risking a real episode of perhaps the Arab Spring taking a particular form that we saw glimpses of in July of 2021. Directionless chaos hijacked by any opportunist in town. So we are in a worse moment. The GNU, you only have the ANC, you have the UDM, which is itself an offspring of the ANC, if I can use that. You have the Songezo organization, who lean towards a international order based on rules that are fair, that would not undermine the sovereignty of any nation. But you've got the biggest organization of the right wing. I mean, in the form of the Democratic Alliance. I normally call them the true safeguards of capital, which are now a very important component of the Democratic Alliance. You have the Freedom Front Plus. All of them, the response to the abduction of a leader of another country is to say, yeah, they did well to the dictator. South Africa must go to the International Court of Justice to complain about the human rights abuses of in Iran. But they will say nothing about supporting South Africa taking the Israeli butchers to the International Court of Justice. That one is fine. You've got that. These people openly now, arrogantly, can you believe the state of our country? Connie Mulder issues a statement and it gets repeated in every media. ANC is not speaking
on
behalf of South Africans, meaning that we must be listened to. We are a big factor now. That's the state of the country. So imagine if Trump was to do what, out of this nonsense, out of this propaganda, which is deliberately driving South Africa is conducting a genocide. What do you do to a country that is conducting a genocide? You take it to, ordinarily, you take it to the ICJ, and the ICJ issues, as it has done to Benjamin Netanyahu, that this is a world criminal, he must be arrested anywhere. If you don't arrest, you wish that this person could be killed. Deep down in our hearts, somebody who have molded generations and generations of children, starving them to death and allowing women to be killed in the same manner as you kill soldiers in the war. So one day Trump is going to march India, and I don't think that is a far-fetched dream or a reality. It can happen. It can happen that one day he comes here and he puts the head of state, and we have seen how easy it took for him to go into one of the most protected compound and in overnight abduct the leader and announce that there will be a new government in that country and that the resources of that country will be now exploited by us. He can do that to South Africa anytime. South Africa is discovering gas left, right, and center everywhere. There is a gas in its billions in Cabo Delgado, and in Mozambique, and there is minerals, bigger concentration than any other part of the world in a country that is still part of SADC, the DRC. He has real economic interest in South Africa, even though our minerals are depleting, but we're still the home of chrome, of platinum, and coal. Don't you think that he cannot march here next after flattening Venezuela, Mexico, Cuba? He will come here. And now the importance of your question is that when he does that, the right wing will still say, Ramaphosa must go. We hate this man. Look at the chaos that South Africa is as a result of him. Let him go. I saw another study that frightened me that says 40% of South Africans will prefer a coup because that's how desperate they believe the situation is. So if this guy Mkhwanazi was to have those ambitions, he will get probably 40% of the country says thank you very much to get rid of these politicians. And that will be the end of the order. We will be into Nigeria. Because in Nigeria there was a democratic state before. The army took over, and over decades they created the havoc that we all see in Nigeria today. So this is the biggest risk and the biggest threat. And that's why I hope that all of these organizations who are opposed to disorderly manner in which Trump wants to run the affairs of the world can unite and create this broad front of organization. In that front, and a lot of people are mistaking this. They think that the front is the same as the left front. It's not the left front. It's a patriotic front. The patriotic front is about defending your sovereignty as a common area of unity. And we need that more than any other time now. With the Democratic Alliance in the Government of National Unity, together with the Freedom Front, and with the guys agitating the world that they are under genocide, deliberately misinforming and lying. Wow. Wake up, South Africa, before it is too late. We will be angry against Ramaphosa, which we must be angry. We must be angry against the ANC. But hold on. When they come under attack from an external force that have absolutely no interest in protecting and maintaining our democracy and or even advancing our interests as workers and the poor marginalized youth, then we have to wake up and smell the coffee.
There was a time when you wouldn't worry like this about the presence of what you characterize as deliberate open substitutes of capital or right-wing forces. That time was a time you were the General Secretary of COSATU, fastest growing federation in the world, and certainly one of the, by penetration in terms of its place in society. It had a very, very hegemonic, strong voice about the direction of the country, the leadership of the country, and so on and so forth. There was a time when you quite couldn't need as much desperately as we would now this patriotic front, because the hegemony of the tripartite alliance, I remember you used to say, you will feel the might of the workers if you do not, in one instance, accede to certain demands such as increase in salaries and so on and so forth, or stop certain retrenchments. I want to risk asking the question in order to arrive at a much more difficult destination domestically now. What do you think went wrong? How did that hegemony of the tripartite alliance come to represent 40% of the electorate, in your view?
And you should add, what will happen if imperialist forces were to invade South Africa?
I'll give you worse. I am of the view,
Under the current organizational capacities of all organizations.
I'll tell you I think very soon, sooner or later, Trump's chest-beating exercise about the United States Delta Force being the best in the world, only the US military could do what it did in Venezuela, I think it's going to come to an embarrassing stop when evidence is going to come out that there was actually infiltration into the security of Maduro, which basically handed him over. Because I can't believe this Delta Force that got defeated in Somalia could do that in that fortified, well-trained, Cuban-supported, protective system around Maduro. I think we're going to discover, and this is not far-fetched because not so long ago, the president of Cuba before Maduro had been arrested by the army himself. Hugo Chavez once was removed. It took the people to go to the streets to suddenly think that Venezuela's internal security forces put up this big fight. But I'm saying this, that if that is possible, here there are open collaborators and they are right inside cabinet. You characterize them as the right wing. If Trump were to do anything here at home, is finding Mandela's ANC at 40% on the one hand, the left in disarray, SACP is abandoning this Mandela ANC, but on the other, a very well-organized right wing that will welcome him with open hands and work with him. This is not speculation. These people have traveled to the US on many occasions to request a form of, or to agitate for a form of intervention of one form or the other. My question, as you rightly put it, is that is the situation. But what happened? Why? How did we get to such embarrassing levels of weakness as a progressive force that commanded the type of hegemony you were commanding when you were the GS of COSATU?
Let me just, before answering that, make this remark. Outside the big Cape Town pro-Palestine, defend Palestine demonstrations attracting 50, 60, 70,000 people.
Maybe sometimes 100. I recall 1 year during,
only in
the
Cape
Intifada.
and maybe Durban sometimes. But in Johannesburg, 1, 2, 3, 4,000 only. Lucky to have 5,000. The last time we had about 5,000 was when we combined and we took off the jackets of sectarianism and marched together from Newtown to the Constitutional Court. That march was big, pro-Palestine. Beyond that, there's no organization, there is no mobilization. And those marches, the Johannesburg marches, are smaller than the AfriForum march that said, "Thank you, Donald Trump." Is that not frightening? They are smaller in numbers, meaning that the organizational coherence is with the extreme right wing at this moment than it is with ordinary people. That frightens the hell out of me, basically, because it means when Trump comes in, there may be black people chanting, "Thank you for getting rid of Ramaphosa," because they're seeing him now as the enemy. And they cannot think beyond the ANC failures and in society. Black people will be chanting. Look, I interact with this reality on Twitter all the time, and it says, gosh, the levels of the growth of conservatism in South Africa is at the most frightening levels. People are turning conservative as a result of them being disappointed by the ANC. And the levels of organization on the left, SAFTU is not what it thought it will be. COSATU is not what it thought it will be. I remember one naive young fellow from Nihau who used to say, when we get rid of NUMSA and Zwelinzima Vavi and all of their people who are supporting them, we will then have a COSATU of our dream. It will grow bigger and bigger and so forth. COSATU shot itself in the foot. It's not what it used to be, and it's going down and not up. And the ANC, wow. When I now know that anybody who is a multi-billionaire can buy those bridges into electing anyone, basically, no matter what agenda that person is pursuing. The state of the EFF at this moment, no longer a rising hope. COSATU was once regarded as the last hope, even when people were beginning to lose hope against the ANC. But they were saying within that alliance, there is an organization that is keeping them at least on check, is shouting, and it is making noise, it is marching, it is calling strikes, but not necessarily to defeat the ANC, but to advance a particular agenda that they felt was being neglected under their leadership. And everything is dull and dark at this particular moment. I wonder whether when that moment comes, the imperialists now seeks a regime change and impose Kone Mulder as the new leader of South Africa. That's what they're doing elsewhere. They impose, you cannot imagine. The imperialists have no morals, no obligations of any kind to any country. The only obligation is to the resources of that country. They can do anything. In the state where we are now, wow, it's possible. And that's why we are desperate in SAFTU to say we've got to drop any thought of being the big boys. We're not the big boys. We have to drop sectarianism. We have to drop the me first. We have to drop the big heads of leaders who wants to be the ones leading the big march of 5,000 people. And we have to drop all of that. We have to reach out to every organization to say, unless we can find a way of connecting with the demonstrations inside the America today and spread those in Europe, Latin America, Africa as a whole, and the East, we will be taken over one by that agenda of the oligarchs. We stand no chance in the current moment. So you ask me what happened. We shot ourselves in the foot. COSATU was regarded as the hope and fastest growing trade union in the whole world. Opened the doors wide open. I mean, consolidated the earlier attempts to organize workers from 1973 strikes to the Vienna Commission, consolidated that through measures to form these massive industrial unions, FAU, NUMSA, chemical and industry unions and papers merging, everybody merging. At the same time, a massive rise of unionization in the public sector and local government to form this massive giant of workers. By 2007, just before Marikana, that movement was representing about 40% of all workers in the economy. You think that 40% is a minority, but compare that to established democracies such as the United States, which were battling with 14-15% of penetration, of unionization. And you say, here is a young, up-and-coming democracy, 40% of its workers are in the unions and growing. COSATU had something called Operation 2030, which was going to lead to at least it reaching about 4 billion workers as its members. And then we were irritated by somebody under which this building, or it's called...
Irritated.
Absolutely irritated. Thabo Mbeki. And we then committed a grave error of judgment out of anger and frustration. And we elected somebody who, it took me about 6 months after he has been elected, President Jacob Zuma, to realize that, goodness, we have made a mistake here. You know, we moved from irritation to disgust. That's what happened. It was a big mistake. A lot of people who have not involved as I was in that operation don't know how devastating that thing was. It was absolutely the worst betrayal. We normally say the ANC is betraying us. They've abandoned the Freedom Charter. We want the Morogoro vision here. We want the RTP here. And why abandoning that for neoliberalism, austerity and privatization and all of that? But we actually embraced counter-revolution. That's what that project actually proved to be. If you look at what then happened to South Africa post 2007. 2007, that inspired workers. Anybody who can say that the Jacob Zuma moment was not about the masses is lying. He was extremely popular with the working people. Exceedingly popular. And the hopes ran up again, you know. It was an error, Chief. And that's why I kept, and every time I get an opportunity, I apologize for believing in this conspiracy theory that everybody he disagrees with would have been a baby, an agent of the regime. And I had to apologize, for example. One of the driving factors against Beki was that we believed the lie that he was an agent, an M16 agent. Because M16 agent. We believe that, no, surely somebody who undermines and sideline workers ought to be taking forward the agenda of M16 and the British intelligence. And only later I realized, hold on. Who's the real spy here? Yeah. Goodness.
We throw
This was a bloody mistake.
these terms around. But
let me tell you what the damage was. You know, this is I'm the first to always look at the things and say, wow. Look, leave the small things that we advise the president, as our ally here. This is how you should operate in this way. And the decency of you as a president. Look at who you are taking over. This man kept his cabinet on his toes. Why? Because he reads. He doesn't go to cabinet blank. And small things like that. Don't get your people gossip about you as a leader, that you know nothing and that they can run rings around you when you don't know whether it is blue or white at the detail of the policy level. The reason why TM was so respected was that he read more than the Director General. He had more details. We said, make sure that you read. Your time now is no longer to see everybody in town who brings no value to the office. Make sure that you are streets ahead. Read and command respect, not on the basis of the authority, but on the basis of the respect people will have because you are leading them. Those small things, Chief. From those small things to big things, because he simply will not play the ball on those issues. And the rest is history, man. Look at one of the things that irritated and put me in shame. I regard myself as those people who go into details when it comes to policy and analyzing. And so we looked at the effect of the Mbeki's policies, economic policies, which we didn't like. But when I look at the reality that when it comes to social spending, he was spending 12% above the rate of inflation by the time we got rid of him. And that when our men took over, we went to 3%.
Yes.
And then we embarked on an unbelievable levels of austerity and even increased the VAT in response to the world economic crisis of 2008. Now, what do I tell workers? I regard myself as a very honest person, I can't turn around now and say, workers, we were right, even though I see, goodness me. And look at the record of this fellow against the right-wing M16 agent. And that's why I began to speak out. And the more, I thought that, by the way, we were moving together because I was not alone. For example, our criticism against the disbandment of the Scorpions, even though we never objected, we saw that thing happening. But a lot of COSATU comrades in the executives asked a very fundamental question. Why is there a rush to disband the Scorpions, but there's no rush to ban the labor brokers? And why is there a rush to take over the intelligence? And there was murmurings left, right, and center. And Blade correctly, not Blade, someone else said, this is but a Zulufication of all of the state institutions. And gosh, before we know it, wow, what you read from the Mufumadi report about what is the state of the intelligence, what you hear in terms of what happened in the Zondo Commission, those piles and piles of chapters of evidence. It makes all of us who were really agitating about this workers' men to feel so ashamed about what we did to the country. And we cannot express that regret enough. That's what happened. So as we speak today, if those guys were to come here, we have no army. Our army have been humiliated here in the DRC by the rebels that are commanded in reality by Rwanda. That's what our capacity was just exposed now. The head of the army says, we have no ammunition in the base. The soldiers who called me when there was the July 16 said to me, we had carrying these R5s, but there are no rounds of ammunition here. If these guys were to come for us, we can only shoot once or twice. Then we have to run and leave the R5s behind to save our lives. That's the state of our army. You know, this is the army that, of course, in the main inherited from the apartheid, the most feared army. From that most feared army into the most laughed about army in our continent. The state of the police, listen to the Madlanga Commission, to listen to the rot that have deepened over a period of time. The state of the intelligence, whether it is the state or the army or the crime intelligence, wow. That's where people are eating. And the capacity is gone, totally gone, because it was factionalized, then it was remodeled as an instrument to protect the wrongdoings of the era beyond 2007. Look at even if we were to arrest big numbers of people, you know, all of our prisons are 115, 130% more people than
overcrowded.
Overcrowded. Westville to everywhere in between Westville and Cape Town. Nothing is functional at this particular moment. And the most regrettable part is that the President Ramaphosa have made some of those things even worse. I mean, if you look at the state of the economy, in reality, more people are unemployed in South Africa today than they were even unemployed under the Zuma era, which is nicely celebrated by sections of the middle class, but the reality of the working class is saying the opposite. Now, you put in the international politics dimensions in a country in that state, it makes you to be frightened to even sleep as to what will be the situation when you wake up in case Trump was to invade. Where does the President Ramaphosa stays and steal him at night and then tell us that someone else is now your president? And only to find out the right wing is celebrating and the rest of society says, well, we don't know what to do. We are demobilized and disorganized. And hopefully we will be inspired by what is happening in New York and where there appears to be a real resistance and mobilization under the current mayor.
I asked this question some serious consideration of, is something of that nature? I mean, when one says, this is how it went wrong, these are the wrong things that happened to us. Do you think there is a possibility of a reconstitution of the hegemony of national democratic forces, the mass democratic movement, the tripartite alliance, that hegemony that pushed the developmental agenda from Madiba up to Ramaphosa with the state that it is in? The reason I ask that question is everybody makes calls now about conference of the left, dialogues, colloquiums. Some of your colleagues in SAFTU have made this call. to say, let's get everybody back on the table. That table being the table of the left. South Africa has gone through many of these before. I was looking at 2000 and 1909, towards the formation of the ANC, 1936, 35, 36, when the ANC had almost died under Pixley Saragasene, the All Africa Convention, in which characters like Jabavu, Uma, re-emerged into the national stage. A couple of many moments where people said, okay, hold on, let's get in one room. Is this a possibility? Firstly, let's start with the trade union movement. Will you be able to enter in the same room with COSATU and say, let us reconstitute something to recover the hegemony of the workers that once was? Is that also something perhaps that could be seen with the political forces now?
Yeah.
Where the ANC gets in a room, I don't know, with the progressive forces it has left outside, or so-called progressive forces it has left outside the GNU. Are these possibilities in your calculation that can happen to resist precisely this imperialist assault and many other problems, unemployment, inequalities? Can the left or progressive liberation linked forces ever reconstitute?
Let me tell you what is happening in the trade union movement. We have something called the annual labor schools every year. After we rejoined NEDLEC, or when we joined NEDLEC as SAFTU as a new entity, we got everybody, everybody to agree that there is a need for a unity amongst the trade unions. That is the four biggest trade unions, being COSATU, FETUSA, NATU, SAFTU, in alphabetical order. We adopted a far-reaching declaration, in my view. We will fight privatization, job losses, austerity. We will defend worker rights and reject any kind of regulations, labor law amendments that will undermine the rights of workers. But more importantly, will coordinate across the federation. Union to union will encourage. In order to do so, we will establish the general secretariat of these confederations as the secretariat to facilitate a movement towards establishment of a confederation, at least as a first step. Oh, I was excited. And then we said, we are targeting the budget together. We will be demonstrating in Cape Town. That was the first.
This is the 2025?
No, last year, 2025. Only SAFTU and COSATU was there. We said we will have singular May days throughout the country as the four federation. No more celebrating May days in different corners. We couldn't. That was where the problem started. The second.
Which May Day?
Last year May Day. Last year May Day should have been a May Day of all unions. We said the Youth Month, we would be highlighting the crisis of unemployment amongst young people. We are doing a celebration together, mobilizing young people towards Women Month, and we're supposed to have a general strike on the 7th of October, which is the International Day on Decent Work all over the world. We couldn't. Instead, we end the year with high levels of tensions because COSATU, in my view, in the worst levels of desperation, instead of pursuing that program, goes to NUMSA and FAO the unions that they fired or that left their federation in disgust in the form of foul to say, please come back home and we want unity. But suddenly the unity is not what we have all agreed to in Pretoria in January of 2025, that this is going to be the program towards the confederation. And suddenly there are tensions, and SAFTU doesn't attend COSATU's 40th anniversary, and it announces that we won as long as you are trying to undermine and liquidate instead of building unity with us towards a singular movement of the workers. You see how dynamic these things can be. So if you can't even establish unity in purpose amongst the most exploited in society, who are going through the hell of austerity, privatization, job losses,
An imperialist attack.
and now imperialist attack. I hope that we will be dispatching letters in this we're writing to everybody to say we need a forum. We don't want to lead a forum. There's already a very broad anti-apartheid movement chapter of South Africa, which is combining unions and religious organization, pro-Palestine solidarity movements. Let's start somewhere. There's something. Let's work together. I hope that people are not going to say we are still angry that you issued a statement to say you won't work with us because you are trying to liquidate us, and so forth and so forth. So it's difficult. Things are difficult, but my plea will always be, forget all of the prejudices. Workers need each other at this moment, not only for the domestic politics, but the international rearrangement that we're speaking about demands maximum unity amongst workers. Do we have people who are matured enough to see that? I don't know. So that's one part. The second question you're asking is whether that there's a possibility of even at the political level something of that kind happening, of people who will say, by the way, in 1950, there was only one liberation movement in South Africa, and there may have been other smaller ones, but there was one liberation movement. There was no PEC, the PEC was inside. There was no Black Consciousness movement because it was inside. There was no UDM, there was no EFF, there was no COPE, there was none of the things that we have seen, including people who may have genuinely thought that the MK offers an alternative. There was none of that. Can we go back to that? I would say that, in my view, there will have to be some thoroughgoing, real self-introspection in the main by the ANC leadership, which remains the biggest organized formation politically in South Africa today. They have to ask themselves what happened. Genuinely, Chief, I'm not talking about what they have done so far, which keeps me, even me, a very loyalist of the ANC deep down in my heart, at bay, because I can't see any introspection happening. I don't see it.
But what do you make? I mean, there's a concrete debate now where the party says it's going at elections alone. Is there still an NDR alive there?
I think the SACP, in my view, is making a fundamental mistake in thinking that they can disassociate themselves from the damage that has been caused over the past 30 years. They were the face of privatization, the face of neoliberalism, the face of implementing anti-worker policies. They can't say this thing that Gwede says, that when you are deployed in the ANC, you forget about you being a communist, a socialist, you become a nationalist, and you implement the policies. There's nothing that have discredited the SACP leaders amongst the workers. and amongst the people of this country more than those politics, because people correctly see those politics as self-serving and self-centered, and people who are advancing a career at the expense of the principle. If there's anything, if the ANC is damaged, so is the SACP damaged at the reputational level. They stand no chance in the blue hell to be an alternative to the ANC. Not at all, unless they too can do an introspection, because the introspection will include how did we get hoodwinked by Jacob Zuma to destroy unions and their unity. As the SACP, because the SACP was a leading force in dismantling the unity of COSATU. Leading, including the current General Secretary and the former General Secretary. And they thought that they were doing this for Jacob Zuma when they were actually destroying the seeds of unity amongst the people of this country. So they are discredited. And all I see is what somebody in Limpopo once said, that one day, unless this introspection happens, there will be 3 tombstones in the graveyard. There will be a big tombstone. I'm not going to say who this original provincial secretary of the ANC who said that in Limpopo. A big tombstone written ANC and smaller tombstone on one side, SACP, small, the other one, COSATU. This is where the future is, unless the introspection happens. And here's the problem then, to be frank with you. How does the people who have messed up themselves not begin to accept the responsibility that we have messed up? For example, how does Gwede Mantashe not take responsibility for what they call the Zumandashe moment of 2012 in Bloemfontein? You know what happened in Bloemfontein? That's when I left crying. I'm not exaggerating. When the former members of Ingata Freedom Front, Ingata Freedom Party, now new recruits, crazy big supporters of the ANC and Zuma, were taunting Kgalema Motlanthe and singing a song I've never heard. In fact, that was the last time I heard of that song, saying, "Go if you want to go," after he has been defeated in a democratic process. In any organization, there are moments where people contest one another, but you don't resort into warlordism and your language. And they came to him. I was sitting right behind him like this in the conference of the ANC. And after the meeting, I walked with him to his place. Totally isolated. I'm a lawyer. This was my general secretary in the NUM, and this is the educator of my union, the NUM. I can never, ever lose that connection because he loses a conference, which I thought that he was. I hoped, against the hope that people will realize what is happening and see the distraction. When Mavuso Msimang's name was raised on the floor, and for him not to get even a 20-25% of the conference, that shocked me. And I asked, goodness me, do these conference delegates know who Mavuso Msimang is? And this is how all factions are operationalized. I remember I was with Slovo Majola, the General Secretary of NIHAU. We were now moving away from one another at that moment because I had now been openly criticizing Jacob Zuma by 2012, before I scored the own goal myself. And he says to me, this is how things work. We have had the caucus, we have agreed who is going to be supported on the floor and who will not be supported in the floor. You have to look the reaction of that comrade, Sihle Zikalala. was the provincial secretary of KZN at that time. If Sihle Zikalala raises his hand in your support, the whole of this conference will raise their hand. And unfortunately, when Mavuso Msima's name was being raised, Sihle was on a cell phone talking to someone. He didn't raise his hand. So is the conference will not raise their hand. When somebody I've never heard of from Limpopo Vembe's name was being raised, 75%, 80% of the conference, I concluded at that moment that the movement is gone. I was 50 years that year. I went home literally sobbing and sobbing because I saw the mistake we committed in 2007 coming back to haunt us in that 2012 Congress. A very, very important year, the 100th anniversary year of the ANC. Wow. The point that I'm making, until the people like Gwede Mandashe, like as I have done, says that was an error. That Zuma Mandashe thing further put the last nails on the coffins of the ANC. There will be no introspection. There will be no turnaround to say we are closing the chapter from this brinkmanship, cutthroat politics into the politics of principle. Until the current president will acknowledge that, look, guys, I set the ANC back many years when I admitted that money was raised on my behalf to become the president. Something that was absolutely foreign in the ANC. Never, even after 1991 unbannings, did we ever hear that people were carrying bags of money. For you to say so in defense of yourself narrowly, when you are actually admitting that conferences now are about money, and then you say there will be renewal, who believes that? That's not renewal. Renewal is to start by saying it was a mistake, so that you can say to the branch, also using money to win the branch chairperson position, that you will not do that because we've now learned from the past. We're not going to be doing those things. Now we're not going to be using money. People are not going to be campaigning as if we are in the CNIP, you young and good doctor, in the CNIP days. Some of us got to know those politics of the Siskai National Party, the TNIP, the Transkei National Party of Matanzima, that corruption through use of money was actually being brewed inside the party as a norm, that you can only win a conference if you can manipulate the state to get resources for your campaign to win. And that when you win, you will therefore be loyal to money first, and you will be loyal to the people who
Give you the
who
money.
gave you that money
Yes.
and who fundraise for you for that money. And that when they suddenly have an unexplained wealth, you're going to look on the other side. If there was to be that type of honesty by the president and by the deputy president, who would say, sorry, I have 67 million worth of houses. And I can never be able to justify how this happened in a democracy where I only served as a full-time politician for the past 30 years. And this is wrong, and this must change. That's introspection. And the DSG and everybody who are being named in the Zondo Commission, if they were all going to say it was a mistake to take so resources from such a corrupt company, irrespective of the circumstances, I should have not agreed to have my fence sponsored by this company, instead of trying to deny and do nonsensical appeals against the Zondo Commission that will go nowhere. Then that would be introspection. And I guess if such a thing was to happen, and I'm not saying there are angels in SAFTU. No, not. Can tell you now. There is no angels in the EFF. not in the PAC, AZAPO, anywhere. People are doing the opposite of what they are saying through their lips. Across the board. The movement, tell me, if those movements were to represent a real hope for the people, they would have long replaced the ANC. Our people would have seen them as being genuinely
alternative,
the original Tambo, Lutuli, Hani, Bigo, Sobukwe, and you can name all of the African continent's heroes. People are not seeing that. And that's why organization reach a ceiling in no time, and after they reach the ceiling, they start to go down, just like the ANC. We do need a proper introspection, in my view, for that to happen. The renewal thing was supposed to be the introspection. It's not happening. This is not the renewal. This is just not a renewal. It's a rhetoric that promises our people that there will be renewal. It's not. Even the national dialogue, in my view, is not going to be the point where there is a proper introspection, including by the government officials, to say we have made massive contributions to get South Africa where it is today, and we have to change. If people are refusing to change, there will be nothing new about it.
What then becomes of the rest of society? Is it
sometimes I
a
say,
compoundment of even darker years to come?
No, hold on. Maybe, and I'm now saying this against hope, maybe the Trump threat to South Africa may be the moment. Maybe people will say we are now vulnerable to the imperialist forces because of the state of the country and the state of our organizations. Maybe.
But how do you read everyone's international politics at the moment? Isn't it part of what has happened is a certain retreat from African unity, a deep-seated agitation against the African migrant, the African migrant worker, and so on and so forth. But also, one of the most important forces is this MKP that you keep speaking about in relation to JZ. If Trump is this threat, shouldn't it start with a correct reading that at least on the international front, there is agreement? Something strange happened in relation to Western Sahara. I mean, of all the picket lines you can cross,
you can't cross
of all the... I'm remembering IFP and Umtanaga Pindangene on the boycotts and even mobilizing across the world that do not boycott South Africa. Of all the picket lines you could cross, Western Sahara, I mean, the Morocco itself had already agreed to a process towards the recognition and withdrawal from Western Sahara and handing it over to the Sahrawi people. I'm raising this to say, if Trump is this alternative catalyst, how do you read at this moment? Isn't part of what is weak the very orientation of our international solidarity, that there is much more collaboration with imperialist and semi-imperialist forces in the plane than we realize? If you think on the right, you've got the DA, the moonshot pack chaps. On the other side, the politics of the left at the moment, isn't it true that they've retreated from progressive internationalism?
At some point, okay, this question you're asking, I've been engaging in my mind alone. Because
SAFTU has not said to say, what was that in Western Sahara, in Morocco?
Okay, I'm coming.
Or at least,
question.
Or at least the different one. Haven't the workers said, why would the official opposition be training soldiers in Russia? I mean, they've disowned them at this stage. But the workers are not observing these...
I've been thinking about our call in SAFTU that we must drop all prejudices and embrace this broad front of patriots in South Africa to say no to Trump and to say no to imperialism and to say no to oligarchy. And I was saying, okay, to what extent will you really drop all the prejudices?
Where are you not willing to drop? Is it a prejudice, though?
It's not a
A
prejudice.
prejudice is
Here's a typical example about why I said we embraced counter-revolution and hoping that we are fixing a problem and an irritation we were having. The MKMP, what they call it, MKP, actually issued a formal statement at the point of the inauguration of Donald Trump to welcome that.
yes.
And to say it is heralding a new hope in the world.
Yes.
In their letterhead. I'm not talking about something of some 10
Distant
years
past,
ago.
yes.
No, recently. Trump has been now in the office for the full year. In the recent year, when Trump became the president in January last year.
Yes, true.
At that moment,
12 months ago.
12 months ago, the MK said this is the biggest hope. And I said, goodness, this is led by the faction of the ANC? Now we are building a broad front. The MK is now beginning to make noises against Trump, which is welcome noises. But you can't forget that this is the hope that they were saying is going to happen. Didn't they know that Trump represents what in January last year? So where does MK fit into this broad front? That's one question. Last year, the head of MK takes a South African flag, literally stealing every symbol, into a forum to embrace Morocco, the empire, as well as a country occupying another country called Western Sahara, exactly in the same way that the rest of African continent was occupied by colonialists. MK takes our flag, insult Lutuli and Tambo and Mandela, and put that flag behind him, next to the flag of Morocco. How far are we for that happening with Benjamin Netanyahu? How far are we? Because I'm told that Netanyahu have actually put aside a $100 million to lobby kings, queens, chiefs in the rest of the African continent, because he knows our people, how they relate with that authority. To lobby and churches. As we speak, there's delegations and delegations
Of the evangelical Christians.
who are going to Israel.
To be neutralized.
No, to come and see Simoni, Jerusalem, the one that we are praying about. Suddenly, Trump knows how to invoke that false belief that today's Israel is the same Israel that is in the Bible. He have captured a significant number of South African churches and our king, the temple king, to go and come back and say, yeah, you don't speak on our behalf.
So you're saying,
It's my king, by the way.
yeah, you're saying there are politicians who are quarter to doing that.
I'm worried that MK, if it has crossed the line on the Morocco and it has told the world that the election of Trump heralds a new hope for the world, how far are they from embracing that blue and white flag of the Israel regime? And I've been notoriously raising this issue. What are these trainings for 30 years into democracy? We've seen, and I'm sure you have seen this in my Twitter accounts, when I saw this circulating, that there are people who are being trained wearing MK regalia. What are you training soldiers for? Where were you trained, by the way, yourself personally, now that you love the army and its activities so much? Why is there a South Africans that are locked up in Russia trained to do what?
Sent in your name.
Sent in your name, even though you deny that they were your people or that the people who recruited them were doing that on your behalf. What are they training for? Is that not the biggest worrying question? This makes me to say, perhaps after in 2007, we stupidly and naively embraced counter-revolution. And because we thought that we were solving a small problem. This is the type of politics that we're finding ourselves in our country at this particular moment. It is frightening. This question you are asking is so fundamentally going to the heart of the state of the movement in South Africa today. You know what is more frightening? How many MK voters did we have in last year? Not for 6 million? How many?
Who voted for there were 2 million, I think.
2 million?
2.4.
2.4 million. Those 2.4 million were like we were prepared to die. In 2000.
To die for Jesus.
Yeah, he said, we are prepared to die. They are now, despite everything that is happening and that has happened, there are 2.4 million South Africans who see absolutely nothing wrong. The only point of assurance is that these people are largely in one province and they are not in any other province in big numbers. But that you clap hands for a clear counter-revolutionary project as that, and you don't see it because you are disappointed in the ANC and Ramaphosa and all of that, is to me the most frightening aspect. Because when I say to you, don't be surprised that when Trump marches here, there may be people who will say, thank you very much, we were tired of this vendor leading us. Because that's the type of politics that are being spoken in some quarters in this country, regrettably, despite the 100. How many years the ANC was?
Well, I mean, maybe the final question is that this year might end with an entity of South Africa called the province of KwaZulu-Natal in the hands of precisely this frightening... politically now, what does that mean for the immediate and long-term political desire for the reconstitution of Mabida Kotane, Tambo, Uma's gigantic, hegemonic alliance of workers, of the ANC, of civil society? What does that, for you, represent in the immediate future for the possibility of the reconstitution of this hegemonic liberation force?
If that happens, and it may happen because now we have a 40-40 hung parliament coming in KZN, and if the MK takes over, that will be celebrated in every corner by the right wing. It will be celebrated here, by Morocco, and who will then say, wow, finally we have an ally who have their hands in the real levers of state power. And with state power, you can do anything, even at the local, provincial level. Trump will celebrate the statement that was issued that he heralds hope. And even Benjamin Netanyahu, that butcher, that fellow who's committing genocide against the people of Palestine, will celebrate. After all, have you ever heard the former president Zuma ever speaking about Palestine and genocide happening in Gaza? They will celebrate because they will then have at least a very important base. You know what is more worrying? The base, the 2.4 million, really hope is a real hope for a new ANC of the Freedom Charter. When they are actually embracing this unbelievable levels of conservatism and right-wing politics. But they don't see it. I normally call this double L. Loyalty and love can make you to do very stupid things. It will be absolutely regrettable. And the NFP, a product itself from the IFP, you can't rely on those people politically to analyze what is happening in the globe and what is happening in the country and what is the state of the society in the true sense of not even classmen, just basic things about what's the position of black people in every respect. So that will be celebrated. I mean, that's what we're going to see. And so my dilemma again was championing this thing of the broad front. Should MK be part of a front of patriots to defend the sovereignty of South Africa when they won't defend the sovereignty of the people of Western Sahara? Wow. We are in trouble.
I suppose that we can reconstitute in the near future all of these questions from Trump in relation to the sovereignty of not just Iran, but Greenland, immediate. And maybe before the end of the year, we'll know whether we are the next target or not. But thank you so much. Yes, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you.